Thank you, Abdul, for joining us. For those who are watching, Abdul Salama has worked with Microsoft for over 5.5 years, if I'm right, Abdul, as a software engineer. He then moved on to Zillow. Zillow is a leading real estate marketplace, a unicorn, $1 billion valuated company. He started as a senior software engineer. He moved on to become an engineering manager, and then he went on into doing all things machine learning, and that's exactly the topic of today's discussion. Today, Abdul is at What Our Health, which is a program to reverse diabetes, where he's also looking at all things machine learning. So, to give you guys TLDR of what today's discussion is going to be about, we're going to talk about machine learning roles, how they're different, machine learning interview processes, how the process works at FAANG companies, and so on. All right. So, Abdul, are you ready?
Yes.
Great. So, my first question to you is, what is the difference between an ML engineer and a data science engineer? And especially if someone is thinking of switching careers, which one would you advise them to take up?
Yes. Yeah. So this is a very common question that I get asked a lot. Now, honestly, like right now, like every company has a slightly different, like definition, and kind of like the boundaries between these roles kind of like varies between companies. But generally speaking, a data scientist is someone who's working on the modeling part of things. So their main job is to create like machine learning models, is to understand like the statistics and the mathematics that powers most of these machine learning. They know how to tune them, like they know how to optimize them and so on. So this is usually like the data scientist. Machine learning engineer is someone who has a very good understanding about like machine learning and modeling and the different type of machine learning model, but they also have a very strong engineering background. And historically, it has been always looked at data scientists as someone at least who's not expected to be an engineer. They do not have like a strong engineering background. So usually their job is to focus on the prototyping of things, right? But that's a completely different story from putting something in production at scale or dealing with massive scale data. And usually the data scientist does not have the engineering skills to do that. And that's where the machine learning engineers comes into play. So they will take the model or the prototype developed by the data scientist, and they are the one who's going to do all the engineering work around it to put it into production. Now, machine learning engineer is also like expected to understand like, the modeling as, some depth about like machine learning, and that's how machine learning engineer is different than just like a normal backend engineer. They still like have to understand machine learning, because lots of the time machine learning engineer has to work directly with the model. In some cases has to modify the model, like to make it more suitable for distributed training or more efficient training, and so on.
All right. So a very interesting question here. Which one pays more?
Oh yeah, I forgot the part about like which one do I recommend?
Yeah, which one do you recommend, and why do you recommend?
Yeah, and which one pays more? Honestly, like, from my personal experience, I tried at some point to do some research about this. I honestly like did not see a significant, and I think at some point I looked at some like articles about that. I did not see a significant difference in terms of like the market need for these skills and the pay. So I did not see a significant difference in that part. I guess different studies has different results. But honestly, like from my experience, if you ask me which one I would recommend, I would say definitely go for your passion. This is the important part, because there's a huge potential in both parts, in both paths. And wherever you succeed, you can really like make a huge impact and achieve your goals, whether it's like financial goals or whether it's kind of like, like a specific position or level in the corporate world. So I would say follow your passion, whichever one you like more. That's probably the one that you're going to be more successful in. Both are very good like that, and the demand for both of them is very good right now.
All right, thank you. So, Abdul, from your experience, how does one get a job, like an ML job in a FAANG company, or in a tier 1 company, in a global unicorn company? We're talking about all of these, right? Considering your experience, how does one get an ML job here without having prior ML experience?
Yes, yeah. So this is gonna be to some degree like hard to get directly into like a core machine learning engineer in top tier companies without the proper experience. They're almost like always expect some experience in there. But I would say there's a workaround, and it's very easy to get to it, which is lots of these like machine learning teams and like org, they also have like software development engineering positions, right? Like lots of these teams, like they have data scientists, they have machine learning engineers, and then they have like software engineers, right? And again, like the definition between these roles like differs, right? But like assuming with this split, I would say like try to get like a software engineering position in a machine learning context team or org, right? Where mainly your task or the expectation from the role is engineering, but it's in the context of machine learning. And then if your machine learning is your passion, you're gonna have some opportunities in that team to get slowly introduced into machine learning concept. You're gonna be working very closely with potentially machine learning engineers and so on. And that's how you can start to build that machine learning experience that will prepare you for the next position where you can potentially apply for a machine learning engineer, because now you have some idea, you have some experience that can be leveraged.
All right. So now the flip side, if you are already a machine learning engineer and you want to get into a FAANG company, in an ML role again, why is it important to prepare? Because, you can just, if you already have the experience, okay, firstly, do you think it's important to prepare for a FAANG interview? And if you think so, why? If you already come with prior ML experience.
Definitely you need to prepare for sure. And why, as they always say, having a job is the worst enemy against your interview skills. So the interview, even if you have like a really good experience, the interview process is not gonna be necessarily what you do, like what we do every day. So same as like interview for software engineering, where you're gonna get asked about like fundamentals like data structures or trees or hash maps or dynamic programming. These things that you don't do every day at your job, right? But you still need to prepare for them. So same for an ML engineer, right? So most of you, like in daily job, you're focusing on just like daily tasks, very specific tasks, and you will get to forget like some of the basic concepts or basic design principles that you're gonna get asked about for sure during the interview process. Because for interview, like they want to make sure that you understand the basics, you understand the basic concepts and so on. And if you do not refresh your memory about like these concepts and how you think about them, then this is going to be problematic, and that's why you need to prepare for the interview.
All right. So Abdul, since you're talking about the concepts, can you do a little deep dive for people watching and for anybody who's looking to potentially apply for an ML interview? Can we do a deep dive into what concepts do ML interviews test for, especially at the top companies?
Yeah, definitely. I would say like for a machine learning engineer, like in addition to you being an engineer, so you're gonna have like the standard stuff about like being asked some coding question, some general design a question. You're also like gonna have some rounds that talks about like machine learning concepts. So usually there's a round that is in addition to the general design round, there's like a machine learning design system, right? And in this, you could ask, you get asked like the questions about like how to design a recommender system, or how do you design like a search ranking or ad prediction system. So they are still like a general, like distributed scalable systems, but they are in the machine context, or like design a self-driving car or computer vision and so on, right? So you're expected to bring all the engineering skills to the table, but also all the machine learning skills into the table. So for example, like when it talks about like recommender system, you need to understand like dimensionality reduction and how it's used to reduce the dimension of the data to make it manageable. Right, same about like computer vision. You need to understand like convolution and pooling layers and how does that used in convolutional neural network and so on. So you need like basically for an ML engineer, you need like to mix engineering skills with machine learning skills so you can put together like scalable systems together. In another like rounds that are not design focused, they're more like focused on ML concepts. You also like expect to get asked about just general about like supervised machine learning algorithm or techniques, right? Like decision trees, right? Like random forest and so on. Unsupervised machine learning like clustering, the k-means algorithm, the DB scan, and so on. So usually like a machine learning interview will cover these concepts.
All right, great. So you were talking about you have to combine software engineering and ML concepts in your ML interview, but how are the coding rounds different in ML interviews than they are in all the other software engineering roles and other domain roles?
Yes, yeah. So when it comes to interview, let's say like a standard, usually you will have like like a general like coding and design round, which is very similar to software engineering.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Now, in addition to that, usually you will have an ML design specific round.
Okay.
Right, and then you will have some rounds that are specific to machine learning concepts, right? That they might dig deep into supervised versus unsupervised machine learning, deep neural network, k-means algorithm for clustering, and so on. Like so some machine learning hardcore concept, and that's the main thing. Now, also like additional rounds might be around like ML tooling and ML ops, right? So you're familiar with using like tools for machine learning workflows. So for example, like Dagstar or like for Airflow, like some tooling and DevOps that are specific like for machine learning development. Right, they use like tools like Kubeflow and so on. So usually there might be around that, like is specific into this. So usually it's common to ask like how the data scientist like interview now different than MLE. I would say data scientist is less engineering, right? So you might have still like some coding question, some deep like like concepts of machine learning, and then like maybe a bunch of statistics rounds to make sure that you understand like lots of statistics and mathematics around the model. You won't usually get like lots of engineering side of things like ML design or so on.
All right. You also touched upon the system design rounds at ML. Do you think you could deep dive a little bit more there and tell us what is really the difference in ML system design rounds?
Yes, yeah. So when it comes to the design round, that's where I mentioned it's very important to bring both skills to the table and mix them, because that's what really requires to put a machine learning system together. So for example, like a general like design like design question for an engineering role would be, for example, like maybe how to design Twitter or how to design Uber or so on, where you're focusing strictly on software engineering, like problems, and you try to see how you scale them, right? Now, machine learning design, they are similar, but they're gonna be around like a machine learning context, right? Where usually like there's a model that you need to train that you're gonna use to prediction, right? So a very common example would be how you design a recommender system. Now, recommender system, like has all aspects of like a software engineering design questions, but also like have some machine learning specifics into it in terms of like how do I design the model, the machine learning model that measures the similarity between like user and content? Is it like a user-based filtering, or is it a content-based filtering? How do we measure the similarity? As I mentioned, like what about dimensionality reduction? Usually, like in machine learning, you deal with data with very high dimensions, and usually this is inefficient. So how do I increase the efficiency and make this scale by applying some techniques for dimensionality reductions, like matrix factorization, like PSA, all of these techniques, right? So that's where you would like to bring both into the table, and you want to talk about both aspects, right? You want to show that you are a good engineer and you are like a good machine learning practitioner as well, because you cannot have that system running without considering both. Like a good software engineer won't necessarily have any idea about dimensionality reductions or the concepts behind that or the technique, but you should do, and you should like mention that or bring it up during the design review, and so on, right? So for example, like another good example would be about like designing an ad prediction system or a search ranking, right? You usually like a technique that is used is kind of like the tower model, where you use like a very simple model at the bottom, but it's very fast to reduce the search space. And then like at the higher level in that tower, like toward that use more complex models, like usually like in neural network, that they are more complex, they takes more time, but they will operate on a smaller search space, like to give you the best results, right? So you need to be familiar with these like practices and understand like which models are simple, which models are complex, which one, like what characteristics each one of them gives you, right? So all of this.
All right, interesting. So I think today everyone wants to become an ML engineer. It's one of the hottest jobs in the tech industry, among FAANGs, among your tier 1 companies. Do you think it's going to continue to be one of the hottest jobs, or it's eventually going to become a mainstream job, the ML role?
Yes, definitely. I think it's gonna continue to be one of the best jobs for sure. I think the best way to answer this question, I always like remember this quote from Andrew Ng. He's one of like the known machine learning scientists, and he gives like lots of classes. So one of the quotes he always says that machine learning is like the electricities of the 1800s. It's gonna come into every single field and completely transform it, right? So think about machine learning in 2000 is exactly the same as what electricity has done 200 years ago for every industry. And this is exactly what we are seeing right now. Machine learning is getting into health industry and completely transform it. It's coming into car industry and transform it. It's coming into data like education, marketing, right? In every single industry, machine learning is becoming the magic concept that everyone is trying to adopt to provide like the next level services that is able like to compete, right? So I think it's gonna continue to be the hot field. I think if it's gonna even like the demand is huge and it's gonna increase, like there's no shortage of machine learning problems that everyone is trying to solve. And especially like with this age where we are swamped with data, and machine learning is the best way to deal with this data and to provide insights and to provide like some business like the values out of this data. It's all about using machine learning techniques, and that's what everyone is realizing, and that's why everyone is bringing machine learning to the table. I have all of this huge amount of data. What can I do for it? How can I materialize, and how can I translate that into some business values? And that's where machine learning comes into this.
Interesting. So now let's take a few steps forward. Someone has gotten the ML job. Now they're working as an ML engineer. How is the life of an ML engineer different from, like, say, a full stack or a backend engineer?
Yes, I think as I mentioned, like the main difference is that you're gonna be working with machine learning models at the heart of your system. And that is the difference between, a software engineer usually just like work with distributed systems, work with services, right? A machine learning model, like there's a model at the heart of at the heart of the system. And that usually brings its own uniqueness about like machine learning, like systems that are different from software engineering. So usually this machine learning model. So first of all, in general, machine learning systems, like they feed on a huge amount of data, right? So they're always like big data into the equation that you need, like, to work with. So there's lots of like things about like data pipelining and data engineering and ETL pipelines. Feature engineering always is big part of the picture, where you need to it's basically like becomes like part of your daily task to look into the data and transmit it and how fast it's refreshed and so on. And this is also like the issue about like the models, where usually you train these models offline, and then again, so usually this is done for like pipelines or what are called like machine learning workflows that are usually like done with tools like Airflow or Dagstar or whatever side. And then there's the concepts of like serving. Right now we have the model that we have trained offline. How do we actually make a prediction against this model? And usually there's like the offline, where again you do prediction offline using like some offline scheduling pipeline, versus like online serving, which looks like more similar to just like an HTTP serving in point, right? So I would say like as a machine learning engineers, on daily basis you will deal with data with offline workflows or pipelines much more than a usual like software engineer that who might like most of the system will be composed with distributed services and so on.
Great.
And especially to add to this is also like the concept of, as I mentioned, sometimes like understanding the model and sometimes have to change it to make it more suitable for distributed training, to make it more efficient and so on. In general, machine learning systems, because they use and consume a huge amount of data, usually they bring their challenges about like how to deal with data, how to scale it, how to distribute it, and so on.
All right. My last question on the ML topic is, what are some of your 101 tips or your what's your secret sauce if you had to advise a new someone who's aspiring for an ML role? What would you tell them? What are your tips of preparing for an interview? How would you, what are the resources that they should explore? How should someone get started with preparing? Because it could be confusing, right? There's so much out there on the internet. There are so many courses. What are your tips?
Yes, definitely. I would say in general, the tip is practice, and practice. This is like, I will be very honest, preparing for a machine learning interview is not easy. It's gonna take some time, it's gonna take some commitment, it's gonna take some dedication. And I really recommend that you really like sharpen on the basic concepts, on the basic ideas, the techniques that power machine learning. Your job is not necessarily gonna give you that. In your job, you might be focusing on a very small area, and you have spent like the last year or two looking into that, and you might not be up to date with all the techniques, or you might have never really studied machine learning, and you just like learned it from the job, but the job only taught you like little bit of things. It did not give you the full picture or the high level, and that's why studying the basics is extremely important through courses or programs and so on. So you have to have like a really good understanding of the core concepts, rather than what you have learned ad hoc from the job. Honestly, Interview Kickstart is one of the best, and I'm not saying this because we're doing this interview, but seriously, comparing it to many other courses available online, I have seen like Interview Kickstart curriculum is honestly one of the best. It's very concise and to the point. So it's not that overwhelming, but it focuses on really very important concepts that every machine learning engineer needs to know. And by the way, these are not gonna be just like useful for your interview preparation, but they will also like really helpful for the real job, because the really main concept that once you understood them, like when you are faced with real life problems in your job, you're gonna be able like to at least you know where to start. You're gonna be able to think, oh, maybe we can use that, and then you can look more into the detail. So interview is not like completely separated from like a real job. Like the skills you learn there will help you a lot. There are also like you know other good courses online. So for example, like I mean, I don't want to recommend any specific things, but for example, like Coursera has really good like courses taught by Andrew NG, for example, like Andrew NG is really famous in this field. So yeah, it just like there's lots of things out there. There's no shortage of sources that you can learn, but yeah, you need to spend the time and really like learn the basics and the topics. So yeah.
Are there any free resources that you would recommend, Abdul, that you know of?
Free resources?
Like any books or, you know, any free resources that are available for students to learn and pick up ML concepts?
Yeah. Like completely free, I'm honestly like not sure.
Okay.
As I would say, like the closest to free, I would say would be like Coursera.
Yeah.
Courses.
Yeah.
They are relatively like really cheap.
They're really affordable.
This really, yeah. This like does not cost really anything comparing to what value and investment you're gonna do to yourself. And there are courses pretty much about like everything, right? You know, like there's actually like there's also like specialization. Has like a bunch of courses together. So for example, like there's this deep learning specialization taught by Andrew and as well. But yeah, I mean, honestly, I would say not so much on the free. Like usually the high quality stuff is gonna be paid. It's gonna cost some money. As I mentioned, you know, like the Interview Kickstart is really a good resource. Also, it's paid, but it's also like really worth it. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Abdul. This was so informative.
Yep.